Alina Carter stood before the gleaming glass tower of Sterling Enterprises, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The morning sun reflected off the building's surface, turning it into a beacon of corporate power that stretched 40 stories into the Manhattan sky. She adjusted the strap of her leather portfolio, took a steadying breath, and pushed through the revolving doors into the lobby. The interior was breathtaking. Marble floors polished to mirror brightness, cascading water features along the walls, and a reception area that looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel rather than an office building. Alina had researched everything about Sterling Enterprises during the 3 months since landing this position. But nothing prepared her for the sheer opulence of the real thing. She was 27 years old, armed with a master's degree from Columbia and 3 years of experience at a mid-tier consulting firm. On paper, she was exactly what Sterling Enterprises needed for their expansion into international markets. In reality, she was here for something far more personal, far more dangerous. A woman in a crisp navy suit approached with an extended hand. "You must be Alina Carter. I'm Patricia Brooks from Human Resources. Welcome to Sterling Enterprises." Alina returned the handshake with practiced confidence. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Let me show you to your office. You'll be working on the 32nd floor with the strategic analysis team." Patricia led her toward a bank of elevators where a small crowd had gathered. "Mr. Blackwood likes to personally meet all senior hires within their first week, so you'll probably cross paths with him soon." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Alina stepped inside, along with Patricia and several other employees. As the doors began to close, a commanding voice called out, "Hold the elevator."
Ow!
A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit slipped through the closing doors. Alina felt the air shift as every person in the elevator straightened their posture. She didn't need an introduction to know who had just entered. Julian Blackwood, 36-year-old CEO who had transformed his family's struggling real estate business into a global investment empire, stood less than 2 feet from her. He was taller than she expected. Easily 6'3", with dark hair that showed hints of silver at the temples. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic features, the kind that belonged on old money and magazine covers. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. A startling shade of steel gray that seemed to miss nothing. 2 women near the front of the elevator were speaking in hushed voices, clearly unaware of who had just joined them. "Did you see the memo about the charity foundation?" The first woman whispered. "He's cutting the budget by 30%. "That's Julian Blackwood for you," her companion replied. "All business, no heart." "I swear the man has ice in his veins instead of blood." "Ice for a heart," the first agreed. "That's exactly what he is. Cold and calculating." Alina saw Julian's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. "Maybe he just hasn't met anyone warm enough to melt it." The elevator fell silent. Every head turned toward her. Patricia's eyes widened in horror. The 2 gossiping women looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Julian's gaze locked onto Alina's reflection in the polished elevator doors. When he spoke, his voice was smooth as aged whiskey, with an edge that could cut glass. "An interesting theory, Miss Carter." Her stomach dropped. He knew her name. Of course, he knew her name. He probably reviewed every hire personally. "I apologize, Mr. Blackwood," Patricia stammered. "She's new and didn't realize... ... It's quite all right." Julian's eyes never left Alina's reflection. "I appreciate honesty, even when it's unintentional." The elevator stopped at the 28th floor, and several people rushed out as if escaping. "Miss Carter, I'd like to see you in my office. Top floor." "Give her 20 minutes to settle in, Patricia." The doors closed, leaving Alina with Patricia and 2 terrified junior analysts who wouldn't make eye contact. "You just talked back to Julian Blackwood," Patricia said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "In your first 10 minutes here, that might be a record." Alina's hands were shaking slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "I didn't mean to be disrespectful. It just came out." "Well, you'll find out soon enough if you still have a job," Patricia said, though not unkindly. "Julian doesn't tolerate carelessness, but he also values courage." You might have just made a very interesting first impression. 20 minutes later, Alina stood outside the executive suite on the 40th floor. The receptionist, an elegant woman with silver hair and kind eyes, smiled at her. "He's expecting you. Go right in." The office was nothing like Alina imagined. Yes, there were the expected trappings of wealth. The floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the city, the antique desk that probably cost more than her annual salary, the original artwork on the walls. But there were also personal touches that surprised her. Bookshelves lined with worn paperbacks alongside leather-bound classics. A photograph of a woman who must have been his mother, laughing in a garden. A guitar propped in the corner, clearly used rather than decorative. Julian stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. He didn't turn when she entered. "Do you know why I built this company, Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice thoughtful rather than angry. "My father ran Sterling Enterprises into the ground through poor decisions and worse partnerships. When I took over at 25, we were 6 months from bankruptcy. Everyone said I should sell, cut my losses, move on." He finally turned to face her, and Alina was struck by the intensity in his eyes, but I didn't. "I worked 20-hour days for 3 years. I made decisions that weren't popular. I cut programs, restructured divisions, fired people who had worked for my father for decades. And yes, I earned a reputation for being cold, calculating, heartless." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. "Because that's what it took to save 3,000 jobs and build something sustainable." Lena held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "I understand that, Mr. Blackwood, and I apologize for my comment." "It was presumptuous. Was it wrong?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know you well enough to say." A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Honest again. Good." Circled around to his desk, leaning against it with casual elegance. "I have a proposition for you, Alina." "May I call you Alina?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "You think I have ice where my heart should be?" "I'm curious if you're right. So here's my challenge. 90 days. Work directly with me on the international expansion project. Observe me, get to know me, see how I operate. At the end of 3 months, tell me if you still believe I'm heartless." This was dangerous territory. Getting close to Julian Blackwood was exactly what she needed for her real mission. But it was also the last thing she should want. Already she could feel the pull of his presence, the sharp intelligence behind those gray eyes, the hint of vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. "And if I still think you're made of ice?" she asked. His smile widened, transforming his face from handsome to devastating. "Then you'll have gotten to know me better than most people who've spent years in my life. Either way, it's a win." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Alina looked at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. Her carefully laid plans would become infinitely more complicated. But she had come too far to back down now. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength in his grip. "Deal. 90 days. Excellent." He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt both accidental and entirely intentional. "We start tomorrow. I have a meeting in Boston that I'd like you to attend. Be ready to leave at 6 a.m. As Alina left his office, her mind was racing. She had 90 days to complete her mission. To find out what really happened to her father's company 10 years ago, when it partnered with Sterling Enterprises. 90 days to discover if Julian Blackwood was the ruthless corporate shark who destroyed her family, or if there was more to the story. But as she caught her reflection in the elevator doors, seeing the flush in her cheeks and the rapid pulse at her throat, Alina realized something terrifying. In 90 days, she might discover the truth about Julian Blackwood. The question was, would she survive the discovery with her heart intact? The private jet cut through the early morning sky, and Alina pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching the sun paint the clouds in shades of pink and gold. She had been working directly with Julian for 6 weeks now, and every day brought new revelations that challenged everything she thought she knew about him. "Coffee?" Julian's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood in the narrow aisle, holding 2 steaming cups, his tie loosened and the top button of his shirt undone. It was barely 7 in the morning, but he looked as sharp as ever, while Alina felt like she had been dragged through a hedge backward after 3 hours of sleep. "Please," she said gratefully, accepting the cup. Their fingers brushed, and she felt that now familiar jolt of electricity that seemed to spark whenever they touched. "Thank you." Julian settled into the seat across from her, stretching his long legs into the aisle. "You were up late reviewing the Tokyo projections." It wasn't a question. He always seemed to know what she was doing, even when they were apart. The numbers weren't adding up. I wanted to make sure we weren't walking into that meeting with flawed data, and I found a discrepancy in the currency exchange calculations. If we had presented those original figures, we would have underestimated our potential revenue by almost 15%. She pulled out her tablet. Showing him the corrected spreadsheets, Julian studied the numbers, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at her with something that might have been admiration. "You just saved us from looking like amateurs in front of the Nakamura Corporation. Good work." The praise warmed her more than the coffee. Over the past weeks, she had learned that Julian was sparing with compliments, which made each one feel earned and genuine. She had also learned that the cold, heartless CEO reputation was a carefully constructed facade. 3 weeks ago, she had been working late when she overheard him on the phone with someone from the Human Resources Department. One of the janitorial staff, a woman named Rosa, had a daughter who needed surgery. Julian had personally called the hospital to arrange payment and set up a fund to cover all medical expenses and recovery costs. When Alina mentioned it the next day, he had brushed it off as simply good business, keeping valuable employees healthy and productive. But she had seen his face when he thought no one was watching. She had seen the concern, the genuine care. 2 weeks ago, during a site visit to one of their development projects, a young architect had made a critical error in his presentation. Alina watched as Julian tore apart the flawed proposal with surgical precision, his words cutting and direct. The young man had looked devastated. But after the meeting, Julian had pulled him aside for a private conversation that lasted 30 minutes. The next day, that same architect came to work with renewed confidence and a clear action plan. Julian hadn't just criticized, he had mentored. And just last week, Alina had discovered that the charity foundation, budget cuts that had sparked the elevator gossip on her first day, were actually a strategic restructuring. Julian had eliminated administrative overhead to redirect more money directly to the people who needed it. The foundation was now helping twice as many families with the same overall budget. "You're staring?" Julian said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Alina blinked, realizing she had been lost in thought. "Sorry, I was just thinking about how wrong people are about you." Its expression became guarded, that familiar wall sliding into place. "Are they?" "Yes." She set down her coffee and leaned forward. "You're not heartless, Julian. You're just careful about who sees your heart." Something flickered in his eyes, a vulnerability that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "That's a dangerous observation, Alina. Why dangerous?" "Because the moment you see someone clearly really see them, things become complicated." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Alina knew she should retreat to safer ground, to the professional distance they were supposed to maintain. Instead, she asked the question that had been haunting her for weeks. "What happened to make you build those walls?" Julian was silent for so long that Alina thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood, moving to look out the small window at the clouds below. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. Her name was Vanessa. We met in business school, got engaged right after graduation. She seemed perfect, intelligent, ambitious, from a good family. Everyone said we were the ideal match. He paused, his jaw tightening. 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home early from a business trip. Found her in our apartment with my former best friend and business partner. Elena's heart clenched. "Julian, I'm so sorry. The betrayal wasn't even the worst part," he continued, still not looking at her. "It was realizing that she had never really loved me. She loved the Blackwood name, the money, the status. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She actually laughed and said I should have known better than to think someone could love me for myself." Now Alina understood. The walls, the reputation, the carefully maintained distance from everyone around him. He had been protecting himself from ever being that vulnerable again. She was wrong, Alina said firmly. Julian turned to look at her, surprise evident on his face. Vanessa was wrong. You are absolutely worthy of being loved for exactly who you are. You don't know me well enough to say that, don't I? Alina stood, closing the distance between them. I've spent 6 weeks watching you, Julian. I've seen you work 18-hour days to save jobs during the merger. I've seen you mentor junior employees with patience and genuine interest. I've seen you quietly help people without expecting recognition or gratitude. She reached out, placing her hand over his heart. There's nothing cold here. Just someone who's been hurt and learned to protect himself. Julian's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and rapid beneath her palm. Alina, this is a very bad idea, I know. There are rules, professional boundaries. I know. And in 3 more weeks, you'll give me your final assessment and this will all be over. I know. But even as she said it, Alina realized that she didn't want it to be over. Somewhere between analyzing spreadsheets and attending board meetings, between early morning flights and late-night strategy sessions, she had fallen for Julian Blackwood. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the man underneath. The one who played guitar when he couldn't sleep, who remembered every employee's name, who carried the weight of thousands of people's livelihoods on his shoulders and never complained about the burden. The man she had come here to investigate. The man whose company had allegedly destroyed her father's business and driven him to an early grave. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. Julian was looking at her with such openness, such trust, and she was lying to him every single day. Her real name wasn't even Alina Carter, it was Alina Morrison. She had changed it when she applied to Sterling Enterprises. Hiding her connection to Morrison Analytics, the consulting firm that had dissolved 8 years ago after a disastrous partnership with Julian's company. She started, wanting desperately to tell him everything, but before she could continue, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. I need to take this. It's the Nakamura team, he answered in flawless Japanese, and the moment was lost. Alina returned to her seat, her emotions in turmoil. She pulled out her own phone and opened the encrypted folder where she kept all her research. For 8 weeks, she had been searching for evidence that Julian had deliberately sabotaged her father's company. Instead, she had found something entirely different. The partnership between Sterling Enterprises and Morrison. Analytics had failed not because of Julian's actions, but because of her father's partner, a man named Richard Chen. Chen had been embezzling funds, cooking the books, making promises to clients that he couldn't keep. When Julian discovered the fraud, he had tried to help her father, offering to buy out Chen's share and restructure the company. But her father, loyal to his partner and suspicious of Julian's motives, had refused. 6 months later, Chen's fraud was exposed by federal auditors. Morrison Analytics collapsed. Her father, devastated by the betrayal and the loss of his life's work, had suffered a massive heart attack. He died believing that Julian Blackwood had destroyed him, because that's what Chen had told him, had told everyone. Alina had spent 8 years believing the same lie. She had built her entire career around the goal of infiltrating Sterling Enterprises and exposing Julian Blackwood as the ruthless corporate predator who ruined her family. But the truth was far more complicated and far more painful. Julian wasn't the villain. Her father's trusted partner was, and Julian had actually tried to save her father's company. She looked up to find Julian watching her, his phone call finished. Everything okay? You look upset, just tired. She lied and hated herself for it. His expression softened. Get some rest. We have 3 hours before we land, and then it's going to be a long day. He stood and draped his suit jacket over her like a blanket. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Alina felt tears prick her eyes. Julian, wait. She caught his hand before he could move away. I need to tell you something. He settled back into his seat, giving her his full attention. I'm listening. This was it. The moment to come clean, to tell him everything. But as Alina opened her mouth, the plane hit turbulence, jolting violently. the seatbelt sign illuminated with a sharp ding. "We should buckle up," Julian said, reluctantly releasing her hand. Alina nodded, securing her seatbelt with trembling fingers. The moment had passed again, but she made herself a promise. After the Tokyo meetings, after they returned to New York, she would tell him everything. She would face whatever consequences came from her deception. Because Julian Blackwood deserved the truth. She deserved a chance at something real with him, even if that chance was impossibly small. The plane steadied, and Alina closed her eyes. Julian's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, carrying his scent of cedar and rain. She had 45 days left on their 90-day challenge. 45 days to figure out how to untangle the web of lies she had created. 45 days to prove that despite how this started, what she felt for him now was completely, terrifyingly real. The Tokyo meetings had been a resounding success. Alina watched from the hotel bar as Julian shook hands with the Nakamura executives, sealing a deal that would expand Sterling Enterprises into 3 new Asian markets. He caught her eye across the room and smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile that made her heart ache with the weight of her secrets. That night, they celebrated on the hotel rooftop with the entire team. The city sprawled beneath them, a glittering tapestry of lights that stretched to the horizon. Julian stood beside her at the railing, champagne glass in hand, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the ambient noise of the party behind them. "For what? For being brilliant? For catching that currency error? For asking the questions I didn't think to ask," turned to face her fully. "For making me remember that business isn't just about numbers and strategy. It's about people." Lena's throat tightened. "Julian, I have to tell you something. Something important." Spone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it and frowned. "It's my head of security. I need to take this." He pressed the phone to his ear, and Alina watched his expression shift from confusion to shock to cold fury. "When? How did this happen?" "No, don't do anything until I get back. I'll be on the next flight." "What's wrong?" Alina asked as he ended the call. "Someone has been accessing confidential company files. Financial records, private communications, strategic plans." His gray eyes locked onto hers, and she saw something she had never seen before: suspicion. "The breach has been traced to an account created 8 weeks ago. The same day you started working at Sterling Enterprises." The world tilted beneath Elena's feet. "Julian, I can explain. Can you?" His voice was dangerously soft. "Were you going to explain before or after you finished gathering whatever information you came here to find?" "It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Right now. No more delays, no more excuses." "Tell me the truth, Alina, if that's even your real name." The party continued behind them, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding. Alina felt tears burning in her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She had known this moment would come. She just hadn't expected it to hurt this much. "My real name is Alina Morrison. My father was Thomas Morrison, founder of Morrison Analytics." She watched recognition dawn on Julian's face, followed by something that looked like betrayal. "The consulting firm that dissolved 8 years ago? Yes, my father died believing you destroyed his company. I grew up hearing stories about the ruthless Julian Blackwood who crushed small businesses without mercy. So when I graduated and built my career, I had one goal: get inside Sterling Enterprises and find proof of what you did. Make you pay for destroying my family." Julian's jaw clenched. So everything between us, every moment, every conversation, was a lie. "No," Alina stepped closer, desperate to make him understand. "At first, yes. I came here to expose you. But Julian, I found something completely different. I found the truth." "What truth?" His voice was ice. "That you didn't destroy my father's company. Richard Chen did. He was embezzling funds, committing fraud, and when you discovered it, you tried to help my father. You offered to buy Chen out and restructure the company? But my father refused, because Chen convinced him you were the enemy." Julian went very still. "How do you know this?" Because I spent 8 weeks investigating every file, every transaction, every communication from that time period. I found the emails you sent to my father, offering assistance. I found the financial records showing Chen's embezzlement. I found everything. Elena's voice broke. My father died hating you for something you didn't do. And I almost made the same mistake. Almost. Julian's expression was unreadable. So you discovered I wasn't the villain you thought, and what? Decided to keep lying to me anyway? To keep pretending, while you gathered more information? I was going to tell you. Tonight, I was trying to tell you when your security called. Convenient timing. The word hit her like a slap. I know I don't deserve your trust. I know I've destroyed any chance we had. But Julian, please believe me. What I feel for you is real. Everything these past 6 weeks has been real. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? He set down his champagne glass with careful precision, as if afraid he might shatter it. You infiltrated my company under false pretenses. You've lied about your identity, your background, your intentions. You made me trust you, made me feel things I swore I would never feel again, and it was all based on deception. I was wrong, Elena said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I was so wrong, Julian. I came here angry and grieving and looking for someone to blame. But I found you. Not the CEO, not the reputation, but you. The man who plays guitar at 3 in the morning when he can't sleep. Who remembers the names of every security guard and janitor. Who carries the weight of thousands of people's livelihoods and never complains. Who has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met, even though you hide it behind walls. Julian turned away, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles went white. I need you to leave. Tomorrow morning, Human Resources will handle your termination. I don't want to see you again, Julian, please. Go, Elena, just go. She wanted to fight, to argue, to make him listen. But she had forfeited that right with her lies. So she did the only thing she could. She walked away, leaving him alone on the rooftop under the Tokyo stars. The flight back to New York was torture. Elena sat in economy, using her own money for the ticket, while Julian was somewhere in first class. She spent the 13 hours composing and deleting emails, writing and tearing up letters, trying to find words that could possibly convey her remorse and her love. Because she did love him. She had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with Julian Blackwood, and she had destroyed any chance of him ever believing it. When she landed at JFK, there was a message from Sterling Enterprises Human Resources requesting she come to the office to collect her belongings and sign termination papers. Elena dragged herself through the process in a fog, packing up her desk while former colleagues avoided eye contact. The gossip had already spread. The new analyst who had betrayed Julian Blackwood's trust. She was almost to the elevator when a voice stopped her. Miss Morrison. Elena turned to find Julian's assistant, an efficient woman named Grace, who had always been kind to her. Mr. Blackwood would like to see you. Top floor. He said he didn't want to see me again. He changed his mind. Please, it's important. Elena's hand shook as she rode the elevator to the 40th floor. She had no idea what to expect. More anger? Legal threats? She deserved both. But when she entered Julian's office, he wasn't alone. A distinguished older man in a police uniform stood by the windows, and a woman in an expensive suit sat in one of the visitor chairs. Elena Morrison, Julian said, his voice formal and distant. This is Chief Detective Howard and District Attorney Patricia Wells. They have some questions for you about Richard. Chen. Elena's confusion must have shown on her face because the district attorney stood and offered her hand. Miss Morrison, we've been building a case against Richard Chen for securities fraud for the past 2 years. We understand you've been conducting your own investigation into his activities 8 years ago. I don't understand. Julian brought us the files you compiled, Chief Howard said. Your research is remarkably thorough. With your testimony and these documents, we finally have enough to charge Chen with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Lena looked at Julian, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. You turned over my research to the police? Your father wasn't Chen's only victim, Julian said quietly. There were 3 other small firms he destroyed the same way. Families who lost everything because of his greed. The evidence you gathered could finally bring him to justice. If you're willing to testify, of course I'll testify. But why? After what I did to you? Julian finally met her eyes. Because you were right about one thing. This isn't just about business or numbers. It's about people. Those families deserve justice. Your father deserves justice, even if he's not here to see it. The district attorney cleared her throat. We'll need you to come downtown and make a formal statement. Chief Howard will escort you. After they left, Alina and Julian were alone in the vast office. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Thank you, Alina finally whispered. For doing this, for helping those families. You'll thank me. You did the work. Julian moved to his desk, maintaining careful distance. The investigation will take several months. You'll need to stay in New York to cooperate with the prosecution. I understand. Sterling Enterprises will provide you with legal support and cover your living expenses during the trial. That's not necessary.
Yes, it is. For the first time, emotion crept into his voice. What you did coming here under false pretenses was wrong. But what you discovered and what you're willing to do now to make it right, that takes courage. Real courage. Elena felt fresh tears threatening. I'm so sorry, Julian. For lying, for deceiving you, for making you doubt yourself. You asked me once if I still thought you had a heart of ice. The answer is no. You have the warmest heart I've ever known. I was just too blinded by my own pain to see it at first. Julian's jaw worked and she could see him struggling with his emotions. You broke my trust, Elena. That's not something I can just forget. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that everything I said to you, everything I felt, that was real. The lies were about my name and my reasons for being here. But my feelings for you were never a lie. How am I supposed to believe that? You're not. You shouldn't. Elena picked up her box of belongings. But I'm going to testify against Chen. I'm going to make sure he pays for what he did to my father and those other families. And maybe someday, if you can ever think of me without anger, you'll remember that at least I tried to do the right thing in the end. She made it to the elevator before Julian's voice stopped her. Elena, wait. She turned, hope flickering dangerously in her chest. He stood in his office doorway, silhouetted against the windows and the city beyond. I don't know if I can trust you again, he said, his voice rough. But I'd like to try. After the trial, when everything is settled, would you have dinner with me? A real dinner with no lies between us. Why would you want that? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Because despite everything, despite the deception and the betrayal, I fell in love with you. Maybe I'm a fool, but I need to know if what we had was real. I need to know if we could build something honest together. Elena's breath caught. You love me? God help me, yes. I love your intelligence, your courage, your passion for justice. I even love your stubbornness and your terrible habit of working until 3 in the morning. His smile faded. But love isn't enough without trust. So we start over. Slowly. Honestly. And we see if we can build something real. I would like that, Elena whispered. I would like that more than anything. 6 months later, Elena stood in a courtroom watching Richard Chen being led away in handcuffs after being convicted on 14 counts of fraud and embezzlement. The families he had destroyed sat in the gallery, finally seeing justice served. Elena's mother, who she had reconciled with after years of estrangement, squeezed her hand. Outside the courthouse, Julian waited. Over the past 6 months, they had rebuilt their relationship piece by careful piece. Coffee dates where they talked about everything except work. Long walks through Central Park where he told her about his childhood and she shared stories about her father. Slow kisses that promised patience and second chances. It hadn't been easy. Trust, once broken, was hard to repair. There were moments when Julian's old walls went up, when doubt clouded his eyes. There were times when Elena's guilt threatened to overwhelm her. But they kept choosing each other, kept choosing honesty over comfort, truth over easy lies. Hey, Julian said as she approached, pulling her into his arms. How are you feeling? Like I can finally let go, Elena said, breathing in his familiar scent. Like maybe my father can rest now, knowing the truth came out. He would be proud of you. For finding the truth, for having the courage to face it, even when it meant admitting you were wrong. Elena looked up at him, this man who had every reason to hate her but chose love instead. I love you, Julian Blackwood. Your brilliant mind, your generous heart, your terrible habit of working too hard. All of it. I love you too, Elena Morrison. He kissed her forehead gently. So what happens now? Now. Elena smiled. Now we go forward. Together. Honestly. Together, Julian agreed. I like the sound of that. As they walked away from the courthouse hand in hand, Elena realized that her 90-day challenge had transformed into something far more profound. She had set out to prove that Julian Blackwood had a heart of ice. Instead, she discovered that his heart was warm and true and capable of extraordinary forgiveness. And in the process of melting his walls, she had healed her own broken heart. The city stretched before them, full of possibility and second chances. Elena had learned that the truth, however painful, was always worth pursuing. And love, real love built on honesty and trust, was worth fighting for, even when you had to fight against your own mistakes to find it. Julian squeezed her hand and she squeezed back, a silent promise. No more lies. No more walls. Just two people who had found each other in the midst of deception and chose to build something real from the wreckage. And that, Elena thought as they disappeared into the Manhattan crowds, was the greatest victory of all.